this video, I'll go over lightning effect in Unity. We will create a procedural lightning with VFX graph as well as an environment lit rain. Then I'll show you how to create the lightning flash using volumes. Then we add some sound effects. Alright, let's get started. I'm only using an HDrp for my scene lighting. Let's start by adding the rain. Create a visual effect and drag and drop it in the scene and start editing it. I'm going to start by changing the random velocities y to -8 to -15 so that the rain drops. Then I set its position to an AA box, and for now I'm going to set it to be 40 by 40, and I'll set its centers y to 25, and I also add the sound effect to the game object. Let's increase the spawn rate to like 16,000 and the capacity to 50,000. And as you can see, it starts being like a heavy rain. We don't want these particles to become bigger over lifetimes, so we'll get rid of the set size over lifetime. Instead, in the initialize context, I'm gonna add a set scale, and I'm going to set the X and Z to 0.15 and the Y to like 15 or 13. Now let's change the output texture to the default particle. As you can see, the raindrops are facing the camera. So let's change the orientation to be along velocity. To make it look a little more stormy, I'm gonna change the random velocities Z, and also move its center on the Z a little. We don't want its lifetime to be random, so I'm gonna get rid of that component. Instead, I'm gonna add set lifetime, and I'm gonna set it to 3 seconds. Alright, let's make the scene dark. But as you can see, the rain is not being lit by the scene light. For that, we need a lit output. So add an output particle lit quad and assign the texture and the orientation, and now you can see it's being lit by my spotlight here. The raindrops are water, so let's set the alpha to something lower so that it's semi-transparent. I'm going to set the alpha to 0.2. I want it to be visible even if there is no direct lighting. So I'm going to plug back the unlit output as well, and I'm going to set its alpha to 0.1. The lit output receives light on its surface, but I believe if you want the raindrops to be lit on their other side as well, I believe you can use some shaders like a subsurface shader or something. And there's actually a shader input in the lit output. Our rain game object is being a collision killed, so to prevent that, change the boundary to something big, like 100 by 100 by 100, and now it's not being a collision killed. Alright, let's add some properties so that we can edit this rain from the inspector. I'm gonna add an integer for my rain's intensity, and I'll plug it into the spawn rate. Then I'm gonna add a float for the area of the rain. I add an AA box here, and in the size I'm gonna plug this float variable in the X and Y, and I'll set its centers Y to 25, and I'll use this AA box for the set position. I'm gonna multiply my rain's intensity with the area variable so that no matter how big or small the area, the intensity of my rain would remain the same. Then I'm going to add a vector 2 for the wind. You can plug the X into the X and the Y into the Z in your set random velocity. And as you can see, when it's set to 0, the raindrops start falling straight down. But when I change the value, the rains go diagonally. You can use two vector twos, one for the wind's direction and one for its random velocity. But I'm going to use only one vector, so I'm going to multiply a vector with a float, and a float is a random number. Then again, I'm going to plug that into the x and z of the velocity. Alright, that's it for the rain. Now let's add another VFX graph for the lightning. Delete the entire graph and add a simple heads and trails system. Change its boundaries so that it doesn't get a collision killed, and set the y's velocity to -5 to -20 so that it shoots downward. Also set the z and x to go from -5 to 5. In the update context, change the intensity of turbulence to 2.5 and the scale to 10 so that it goes crazy. Also increase the frequency to like 5. I'm gonna change the color for now, but we're gonna change it again later. I decrease the lifetime a little so that it is shorter. In the streep's turbulence, I decrease the latency to 0. And it already kind of looks like a lightning. We don't need a constant spawn rate, so I add a periodic burst. Now I want to spawn more of these particles from the existing particle. So I select the entire graph, I make it a group, and then I'll duplicate it. And in the main particles update context, I add a trigger event rate, and I set its mode to over distance. To have trigger events, you need to enable experimental nodes in the preferences of the visual effects. I set its rate to 1. I delete the spawn context of the sub-emitted particle. Instead, I drag the trigger event into a GPU event and plug the spawn event into the initialize context. Now let's add an inherit source position to our sub-emitted particle so that it gets spawned from the main particles. I decrease the sub-emitted particle's lifetime so that it's shorter than the main one. Now I duplicate this one more time and I repeat the entire process one more time. I'll delete size over lifetime from all groups. Then our lightning will look like this. But it's really slow, and unfortunately changing the play rate doesn't work. It just mess up the noise frequency and everything, making it look like anything but a lightning. So what I did was to set color over lifetime and make it visible only for a short time so that it seems faster. And it's not actually faster, it just looks faster. I duplicate my sky volume and rename it to lightning flash, and I create a separate profile for it. Then I add the visual environment and HDrp sky overrides, and I copy my sky settings, except the sky's exposure is set to a high number so it looks bright like a lightning flash. We will enable this volume when the lightning hits. It kinda looks daytime, so I add a color adjustment to bring the saturation down. But I also add a bit of post exposure and contrast, and I give it a bluish color filter so it feels more like a lightning. Now all is left to do is animate this volume. So I create a new clip, and in the first frame I set it to 1, in the second frame to 0.7, in the third 0.8, 0.6, and 0.7 again, and then 0.1, and then in the last frame I set it to 0. We don't want it to be looped, so I disable the loop time, and here in the animator I decrease its speed to 0.1. I add an empty state here to be our default state, and then I transition from that and the NES state to my flash animation. And we want this transition to happen only when we want, so I add a trigger called flash to their conditions. And our empty state shouldn't have exit time, and I transition back to the default state. Now I create a script for it, and we should be using Unity engine.vfx. We need a reference to our lightning visual effect and a reference to the animator of our lightning flash volume, and a few thunder clips and an audio source to play them. I write a coroutine which will play the lightning with random delays, and I start it in the start method. Here I do yield return new wait for seconds, and we wait for a random amount of time before we hit the next lightning. And then we play our VFX, and then we wait for another 3 seconds for our lightning to become visible, and then we trigger the lightning flash, and then we wait for another 2 seconds, and then we choose a random thunder clip and we assign it to our audio source, and then we play it. For this to actually repeat throughout the game, we should put this entire piece of code into a loop. I downloaded 2 sound effects from YouTube. I'm gonna assign it to my script. And that's it. And that's it for this video. Stay tuned. I will see you in the next video. Peace out.